So, you've probably heard a lot about banks being super important to our economy, right? Well, it's true. They're like the backbone of it all. You know the Federal Reserve? It's actually a kind of bank, but it's unique because it can actually create money, which is pretty wild if you think about it. But guess what? It's not just the Federal Reserve that can do this money-creating magic. Technically, any bank can do it. Imagine starting your own bank and making your own money. Sounds crazy, but it's possible. However, starting a bank can be really expensive and complicated. There's an easier way to get into the money game: cryptocurrencies. Lately, it seems like everyone's talking about cryptocurrencies. Some folks have even become billionaires overnight by jumping into this world. If you think cryptos are just a big scam, it might be because the whole banking system is a bit of a mystery. In this video, I'm going to share 5 surprising facts about money that banks might not want you to know. Why? Well, if everyone knew these secrets, it could really shake things up for banks. Henry Ford, the car guy, once said something like, "It's probably for the best that most people don't get how banking and money work. Because if they did, we might have a revolution by tomorrow morning." That's pretty intense, right? If you're ready to dive into these secrets, hit the like button on this video. Now let's jump back into our talk about those banking secrets. Number 1. Keeping your money in a bank is a scam. Okay, let's dive a bit deeper into why keeping your money in a bank might not be as great as it seems. When you put your savings into a bank account, the idea is that you'll earn some interest on it, right? You're probably hoping for a decent return, at least a few percent, because that's what makes saving worth it. But here's where it gets interesting, and not in a good way. The reality is that the interest rates offered by most big banks are super low. We're talking less than 0.5% in many cases, like with some accounts at Citibank. You might find some banks offering a little bit more, maybe close to 1%, but that's still pretty rare, especially these days when interest rates are really low. So let's think about what this means for your money. If your savings are growing at a rate of, say, 0.5%, but at the same time inflation is at 2.5%, there's a problem. Inflation is all about how prices for things we buy regularly, like groceries or clothes, go up over time. So if inflation is higher than your interest rate, the actual value of your money, like how much stuff it can buy, is decreasing every year. In simple terms, your money is losing its power to buy things. This is why keeping large amounts of money in a bank might not be the best idea. Your money's not really growing. In fact, due to inflation, it's like it's shrinking in terms of what it can buy. That's why you might hear people say you're better off spending your money now or investing it elsewhere, because in a few years, it won't go as far as it does today. And here's another thing to consider. When inflation is high, like we've seen recently, the prices of assets like houses and stocks tend to increase a lot. Over the last year or so, there's been a big jump in these prices. This makes it clear that a bank should be seen more as a safe place to keep your money rather than a place to grow it. Your money is just sitting there, and while it's safe, it's not working hard for you. In the world of finance, that's a pretty big deal. Number 2, every bank has the right to create money out of thin air. Imagine I tell you that banks can actually create money. You might not believe me at first, right? Most people think only the Federal Reserve, the big boss of US currency, has the power to make money out of nowhere. They're like the official money printers. But here's a twist. Almost every bank in the country, actually in the world, has a sort of mini superpower to create money too. It all depends on how much money people deposit in the bank. Let's make this simple. Say you go to Bank A and deposit $1,000. What do you think the bank does with your money? They don't just let it sit there. That wouldn't make sense, especially since they need to pay you a bit of interest, even if it's just a tiny 0.5%. So what they do is lend your money to someone else, maybe someone who needs to buy a car or a house. Now, the bank charges that person a higher interest rate, way more than the 0.5% they give you. Take credit card interest, for example, which can be around 20%. That's a lot more compared to what you get. Here's the catch. The bank doesn't tell you who they lend your money to. And whenever you check your account, it looks like your $1,000 is still there, safe and sound, ready for you to withdraw anytime. So how can your money be in your account and also be lent out to someone else? This is what they call fractional reserve banking. It means the bank only needs to keep a fraction, like 10% of the deposits. So out of your $1,000, the bank can lend out $900 to someone else. This is where it gets really interesting. By lending out that $900, it's like the bank has created new money. Now, there's your original $1,000 and the $900 they lent out, making it $1,900 in total. It seems like the bank pulled an extra $900 out of thin air. It's easier than it sounds since it's all just numbers in a computer. So in a way, banks do create money, just not in the way we usually think about it, like printing bills and coins. Number 3. You can make money by borrowing money from banks and investing it elsewhere. Let's chat about something surprising that happened back in 2012. John, a rich tech guy, decided to get a mortgage for his $6 million house in Palo Alto, which is just a short drive from tech headquarters. Now, at that time, John was only 28 years old, but was already the 60th richest person in the world, with a whopping $15.6 billion to his name. You might be wondering, why on earth would a billionaire get a mortgage? Couldn't he just buy the house outright? Well, it might sound strange, but there's a smart reason behind it. It's all about the concept of free money. Now, I know it sounds a bit unreal, like, why would anyone give a billionaire free money, right? It's not about charity, it's about interest rates. Remember when we talked about banks and how they give such a low return on your savings that it doesn't even keep up with inflation, so your money kind of loses value over time? This situation with John is kind of the flip side of that. In the US, inflation, the rate at which prices go up, is around 2.5 to 3%. So any money you can borrow at an interest rate lower than inflation is essentially free money. John got his mortgage at just over 1% interest, which is way below the inflation rate. This means the bank is actually losing out because they're lending money at a rate that doesn't keep up with inflation. Let's play with some numbers to make this clearer. Imagine you borrow $1 million at a 1% interest rate. Before the pandemic, the average return on a savings account was about 2.4%. But let's use that for our example. If you put that million in another bank, you could earn $24,000 a year from it. But your yearly payments to the bank you borrowed from would be less than that. Think about how this scales up. What if you borrowed $100 million or even $1 billion? When you can borrow money at such low rates, it doesn't make sense to use your own cash, especially when you can invest that money in something else that could make you even more. For smaller amounts, this might not seem like a big deal. But when you're moving around millions or billions, even a small percentage like 1 or 2% can mean a huge amount of money, like tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars. That's why a super rich guy like John would choose to get a mortgage instead of just buying a house with cash. Number 4, the richer you are, the lower the rate you get. So let's talk about banks. It's important to remember that banks are not charities. They're businesses, just like any other shop or company you see around. Their main goal? To make as much money as possible. They have people who've invested in them, called shareholders, and they need to make sure these shareholders are happy with their profits. If they don't make enough money, they won't last long. Now, here's why banks love lending money to rich people, like billionaires, rather than someone who doesn't have much. Think about it. If you're super rich, the bank knows you're good for the money. They don't have to worry about you not paying them back. And if, for some reason, you can't make your payments, you probably have some assets, like part of a business, that you can sell to pay off your debt. So, lending money to wealthy folks is pretty much a safe bet for banks. This isn't a new thing. For hundreds of years, banks have mostly worked with the wealthy, like nobility. These were people who had steady incomes from things like owning land. Now compare that to an average person with a regular job. They might get sick, lose their job, or have other issues that make it hard for them to pay back a loan. For a bank, lending money to someone living paycheck to paycheck is a lot riskier. It might seem a bit harsh, but think about it in your own life. If you had to lend money, would you feel safer lending it to a friend who's barely scraping by, or to one who has a successful business? You'd probably choose the friend with the business, right? And here's another thing. Banks give really good deals, like low mortgage rates, to rich people because they want to keep them happy. They're thinking long term. They hope that when these rich folks need a big loan for something like expanding their business, they'll come back to the same bank. It's a win-win for both. Now, technologies like blockchain and cryptocurrencies are shaking things up. They're promising to make banking more fair and accessible to everyone. And to be fair, banking has become more democratic over time. Just think about it. 100 years ago, not everyone could even get basic financial services. Today, it's a lot more inclusive. Number 5. Credit cards are banks' nuclear weapons. Let's delve a bit deeper into the issue of credit card debt in America. It's a huge problem that affects many people. Here's a startling fact. Around 70% of Americans who have credit card debt say they won't be able to pay it off this year. Now let's pause and think about what this means. Credit card debt isn't like a mortgage with a relatively low interest rate. We're talking about interest rates that are often around 20%. That's a big deal. So if someone can't pay off their credit card balance right now, their situation could get much worse in just a few months. Why? Because the amount they owe will grow significantly due to these high interest rates. It's like walking into a trap that's getting tighter and tighter. Unfortunately, this is a reality for a significant portion of Americans right now. Around 70% are facing this challenge. Digging into the numbers a bit more, over half of the people surveyed, 56%, have been struggling with credit card debt for at least a year. That's a long time to be dealing with such a financial burden, and the outlook for the future isn't much brighter for many of them. Almost 20% believe it'll take more than 3 years to clear their debt. There's even a group, about 8%, who are so overwhelmed they can't even guess when they'll be debt-free. The reason banks are so profitable is partly because of this situation. Many people tend to spend money without considering how they'll pay it back. They're committed to maintaining a certain lifestyle, often one that's beyond their financial means. That's precisely why banks are so eager to offer new credit cards. They know that for many, the temptation to spend is strong, and unfortunately, that leads to more debt. But it's not all bad. Credit cards used wisely can be beneficial. They're a tool for building a good credit score, which is crucial for financial health. However, this only works if you're financially disciplined. If not, getting a credit card can lead you into a cycle of debt that's hard to escape from. So, if you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe if you haven't already. Thanks for tuning in, and I look forward to sharing more useful information with you next time.